This is Andrew Rigie of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and we have taken the Hospitality and Politics podcast to video, where we're talking with interesting people about important topics. Today I'm here with an old friend, Mr. Glen Coben, the founder of Glen Company, which is an award-winning New York City-based architecture, interior design, and branding agency. Hello, Glen.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thanks for being here. So my first question is, we are in June. The city began shutting down related to the coronavirus back in March. So what have you been up to?
First of all, before I answer that question, I want to thank you because of your efforts and the Alliance's efforts. You know, it keeps us in touch. It keeps the community. It really is about community. The hospitality world is really an amazing family, and it's a community of people. And you're our glue. So while I'm on the outside of it in terms of the operations and the day-to-day restaurants, many of my clients do rely upon what you've been doing. Well, they relied upon you before, but even now, more so now. So. If I were wearing a hat, I would take it off and say, my hat is off to you. You've been very, very busy. We all thank you for your continued efforts to give us a voice and give the community a voice.
I appreciate your kind words. We've been, our team's been working hard and around the clock, so thank you.
Right. Some of what I've been doing is since the second week of March, I guess, my team has been working remote. I can't say we've mastered it because as architects and designers, we rely upon collaboration. We have many different tools at our disposal to be able to work across different platforms. But the day-to-day, I talk about, when I'm asked questions like, what do you miss most? And I go back to that movie Diner where I forget the actor's name, but he said, I miss nuance. So I miss the nuance of conversations and the body language and the idea that even if we're wearing a mask and you can tell when someone's smiling, but you can't tell when they're frowning. And I think that a lot of what I've been doing is really listening to clients and listening to people and listening to podcasts and listening to webinars because I don't have the answers. And I think as what we do as architects and designers, we're focused on a process which is about solving problems and using design as our tool to solve a problem. And my organization relies upon collaboration. So I've never done a restaurant where someone said, just tell me what it should look like. We are all about, and I'm in Gabriel Kreuther restaurant virtually here, which is all about chef, and it's about his heritage and his history of growing up in Alsace and the traditions of the region as interpreted and reinterpreted. And I think that the important thing today is to not jump to a conclusion as much as it is to listen and really try and formulate a series of opinions that may help us as we emerge, but we certainly don't have a solution. Like someone said, a client said, I just need to reduce my occupancy by 50%. And I'm like, dude, that's not the right math. I mean, if you take 6 feet apart, it's not 50% reduction. It's more like a 70% reduction or a 65 to 70% reduction. That math just doesn't work. So, it's really about listening and then kind of trying to aid them in how to enact best practices right now.
So that's
sorry, long answer.
Yeah, no. So that's an interesting point. There is so much talk about how is the coronavirus going to impact the future of restaurant architecture and design. Clearly, there's going to be some immediate changes due to occupancy reductions and social distancing requirements. But what do you see right now? Do you think that it's going to change permanently, or are we just going to be making some modifications to comply with the regulations while we're in the midst of recovery?
Well, again, I don't have a crystal ball. So I don't know what it's going to be like. When we have a viable vaccine, will we want to go back to normal? And Andrew, you and I have paralleled each other for a few years. We have never experienced anything like this, the massive closure of every single industry, essentially, people staying at home. But there are some valuable lessons that we learned after 9/11 and 2009. And then we also learned a little bit during Sandy, right? When restaurants did shut down, and policy began to change. But from a design perspective, look, after those incidents happened and we had downturns, the hospitality community came together and it was all about giving a hug. It was about embracing the guest. How do we do that in the short term? And what will it look like in the long term in terms of the hospitality experience? We go out to be in a community, to be with people, to be surrounded by people. Now, we swerved away after 9/11 and after 2009, we swerved away from fine dining and we went to smaller restaurants that were really about giving people, tightly packing them in, communal tables. So I think we'll see a lot of that go away. Will we see fine dining making a reemergence? Probably not in the long term, but in the short term, you'll see, because of social distancing, you'll see an evolution towards that amount of physical space that, if you look at the spacing of the tables behind me right now, I mean, they're pretty far apart. So, fine dining and I don't want it to sound like, it's completely aspirational and it's about 2%. Restaurants will, in the short term, look like fine dining restaurants, maybe not with tablecloths, but based upon spacing. I do want to say one thing, though. I live up in Westchester, and my wife and I went up to Greenwich, Connecticut to pick up food, some takeout food. And what they did on Greenwich Avenue is something that you have been advocating for, and I absolutely love. And we need to see changes in policy in terms of occupancy and regulations on how we file our jobs with Department of Buildings. The over 75 occupants for the place of assembly, and then the regulation in terms of sidewalk cafes. And I know you've been pushing for the idea of extending restaurants out into the street. Go up to Greenwich. They've done an amazing job with closing down a pretty big chunk of the street, but they've also, where they don't close down the street, they have taken over parking spaces directly in front of restaurants and have built barriers so that cars can still pass by, but they can't park there. And it looks like such a great, I mean, obviously we've got nice weather right now, but it's a great reaction to the immediate issue of spreading people out, but still remaining that they're far apart. The tables are far apart, but there was definitely a sense of a community of being in a restaurant. So, and people were smiling and all the tables were full, and it was just so absolutely encouraging to see that going on up there.
Yeah, well, that's one of the
pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's one of the things that I think is so important about outdoor dining. It's terrific. We have the support of the city council. Mayor de Blasio's come out and support. The Department of Transportation has also put out some proposals. So not only is it important for the economy and getting businesses open and people back to work and sales tax being generated to help fund our essential services, right, but it's also really important, like you said, to get people out and about, to get some sort of socialization happening, because people have been cooped up. They want to see their friends, they want to see their families, and if we can have an organized structure to the greatest degree where people can go out and eat and drink, at least in a safe way, and businesses have the guidance of saying, listen, when you reopen, this is what you have to do and this is how you have to do it. I think it's really important. So lastly, I just want to ask you, you mentioned your clients earlier. So they're calling you up. They're probably asking about, the layout and design of restaurants. But if you could quickly just talk about what kind of questions are you getting from your restaurant clients and what kind of answers are you giving them?
Well, I mean, again, I'm not giving them very many answers. I'm really continuing to ask them questions. And the questions are about safety. How safe do you feel this is going to be? So what's interesting is there are a couple different buckets here, Andrew. One is we're working on several projects that had not opened. They're either almost finished with construction or they're midway in construction. So the good news there is that they still have money that they haven't deployed from their pre-opening expenses, so that they can and then they've negotiated with their landlords to get free rent and get a runway. So they're in a unique position where they can open at a lower occupancy. Some of the things that we're looking at, I mean, we're doing a food hall up at Columbia University, and we've looked at social distancing measures in terms of spreading seating apart and possibly not putting in as many seats. Should we put in a little marketplace? I think that the food halls, I'm jumping around a lot, but the design is the natural evolution of how we're going to address this in the short term. You know, a client still wants to buy the 100% occupancy furniture. We're going to put it in storage. We're going to set it up. And we have done some floor plans where we have addressed the issue of 6 foot distance with either every table is a deuce, or we have a 4-top and then a deuce and then a 4-top. And we've looked at how we can max out occupancy based upon a 6 foot distance from table to table. So it's really not about answering it as much as it's a continuation of the investigation of how we're going to address it in the short term. And there are a couple of projects that we're doing that are in development that we've looked at measures of how do we add possibly a sink at the front entrance? You know, is it a ceremonial sink versus a hand sanitizer? And there are certain things that we can do to mitigate that. Higher back banquettes are a really great device. What you guys have worked on, or what Rockwell has done with the outdoor dining initiative, is fantastic, and I'm proud that of what Rockwell Group has done on that on behalf of you guys and your group. So it's a work in progress right now, and I'm excited about it. I'm optimistic. I have to be optimistic about it. We have always, this industry has gotten better each time we've gotten punched in the face.
Yeah.
So,
and wasn't it Mike Tyson who said everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face?
Yes. Exactly.
Any last tips or insights before we finish up?
Well, I think that, you know, the insight is really, I hope landlords are paying attention. And I know that they're struggling just as much as the tenants who are paying rent and paying the bills. But this is a longer conversation, Andrew, but we were worried about the restaurant industry before COVID. Yeah. You know, with escalating rents and the cost of running businesses. Every time we got hired to do a new restaurant, I wanted to give the client a hug saying, thank you for your belief in opening up a restaurant, not just hiring us, but the amount of strength and fortitude and vision and absolute blinders to take the risk to open up a restaurant. So, you know, restructuring deals in the future so that restaurants are not struggling every single month because the margins are so tight. How do we make it work for all parties involved so that there is a rainy day fund? And I think that it's just me as a business operator, not as a designer. You know, look, we've learned lessons each time we've had these dips in the economy, and we get better at how we address them. So hopefully this whole food chain is paying attention and will address it. I know landlords have addressed it with some of our clients, and I'm very glad to have seen that.
Well said. So if someone wants to get in touch with Glen Company, where do they find you?
Well, our website is glenandcompany.com, all spelled out, GLENANDCOMPANY.com. Instagram is, you can follow me, Glen Coben. It's, you'll see my garden. And then there's Glen and Company, which is a weird because there's some underscores in there, but you might find us. And if you're feeling up to it, I wrote a cookbook a couple of years ago, an architect's cookbook, and it's a fun journey through restaurant design where each chapter. Andrew, do you have a copy of that, by the way?
I know I do not. I know there's a book.
I think I was going to hand it to you at Eisenberg's for breakfast one day.
Huh.
But each chapter is a restaurant that my firm has designed, and it talks a little bit about the process, because I love working with chefs. They're super, super creative. So it talks a little bit about the process. There's no controversy. There's no behind the scenes. Oh, I saw this. Some sketches, photographs of the finished restaurant, and then each chef. And we just know how super, how generous chefs are. So each chef has contributed a recipe from that restaurant. So it's kind of a fun, kooky cookbook, because it has some weird recipes from Romera, and it has some cocktail recipes from Batard, and it's I've cooked a few recipes from it, but
excellent. Well,
it's a fun project.
Pick the stuff from your garden and cook some of the recipes. So listen,
Exactly.
Glen, as always, good to see you. Good talking. Thanks for sharing
Andrew.
your insights. This is Glen Coben, founder of Glen and Company. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you. I'd like to give a big thank you to our guest for coming in. I want to thank everyone for listening to Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Please rate, review, share this show with anyone you think that would like it. You can find us on Instagram and on Twitter at the NYC Alliance. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn, New York City Hospitality Alliance. And I'm your host, Andrew Rigie, and I'm at Twitter at Andrew Rigie, and Instagram, Political Foodie NYC. Join our movement, support the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Find us, the nycalliance.org. We'll talk to you next time.